There is a voice in your head that speaks constantly. It comments on everything you do. It questions you. It doubts you. Sometimes it criticizes you without mercy. And most people believe that voice is them. That belief is the real problem. Because the truth is, you are not your thoughts. You are the one listening to them. If negative thinking feels exhausting, it's not because you are weak. It's because you've been carrying a voice that was never meant to lead your life. Notice this carefully. Thoughts appear. You don't invite them. You don't schedule them. They arrive on their own like weather. Some days the sky is clear. Some days it's heavy. But the sky itself is never damaged by the storm. Most people try to kill negative thoughts by arguing with them, by forcing positivity, by pretending they don't exist. And that only makes them louder. Because what you fight, you feed. This is where everything begins to change. The moment you realize a thought is not a command, a feeling is not an order, a voice is not your identity. Negative thinking only has power when you obey it unconsciously. The mind was never designed to be silent. It was designed to be guided. And the first step to control is not aggression. It is awareness. Right now, as you're listening to this, thoughts may still be moving. Let them. You don't need to stop them. You don't need to fix them. You only need to see them clearly. Because the moment you stop identifying with every thought, the grip loosens. This video is not about forcing happiness. It's about reclaiming authority. Calm authority. And once you understand that the voice is not you, you stop fighting yourself. That's where real control begins. Most people lose the mental battle before it even begins, not because they are weak, but because they are fighting the wrong way. You were taught that negative thoughts are enemies, that you must attack them, replace them, silence them. But here's the truth. No one explains clearly. The mind doesn't respond to force. It responds to attention. Every time you argue with a negative thought, you are still focused on it. Every time you say, "I shouldn't think this way," the mind hears only the thinking, not the rejection. That's why the harder you try to be positive, the more exhausted you feel. Because resistance creates friction, and friction creates heat, and heat drains energy. Think about it. Have you ever tried to push a thought away, only for it to come back stronger? Have you noticed how late at night, when you're tired, the mind suddenly becomes louder, darker, more critical? That's not failure. That's physics. The mind reacts to pressure by tightening. Negative thinking survives not because it is powerful, but because it is engaged. This is where most motivational content fails you. It tells you to replace bad thoughts with good ones without teaching you how to step out of the fight entirely. You don't defeat a storm by yelling at the sky. You wait. You observe. And eventually, it passes. The same is true for thoughts. A thought cannot exist without energy, and attention is energy. When you stop feeding a thought not by force, but by neutrality, it weakens naturally. This doesn't mean you approve of negative thinking. It means you stop giving it authority. Here's the shift that changes everything. Instead of saying, "Why do I think this?" say, "Interesting. This thought appeared." No judgment, no reaction, no emotion attached. That small shift creates distance, and distance creates control. The mind calms down when it realizes it's not being chased or attacked. Just like a child stops screaming when they realize no one is panicking. This is not passivity. This is discipline. The strongest minds are not loud. They are still. And stillness doesn't come from force. It comes from understanding. Once you stop wrestling with every negative thought, something unexpected happens. Your mental energy returns. You feel lighter, clearer, less reactive. And for the first time, you realize you were never meant to win a war inside your head. You were meant to outgrow it. In the next section, we'll uncover the silent damage negative thinking causes when it's left unchecked, not to scare you, but to wake you up. Because awareness isn't comfort, it's power. Negative thinking rarely destroys your life all at once. That's why it's dangerous. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself as sabotage. It works quietly, patiently in the background. Most people think negative thoughts are just thoughts, harmless, temporary, normal. But here's the reality. What you repeatedly think becomes what you repeatedly feel, and what you repeatedly feel becomes how you live. Negative thinking doesn't just affect your mood, it reshapes your decisions. You stop trying sooner, you hesitate longer, you settle faster. Not because you lack ability, but because your mind is constantly whispering limits into your nervous system. And your body listens. Chronic negative thinking keeps your system in survival mode. Always alert. Always braced for disappointment. Always expecting something to go wrong. Over time, this creates fatigue that rest cannot fix. You can sleep 8 hours and still wake up tired. You can have opportunities and still feel stuck. You can be capable and still feel behind. This is not laziness. It's mental weight. Negative thoughts condition you to expect failure, so you unconsciously avoid situations where failure is possible. You call it being realistic, but often it's fear wearing logic as a mask. Here's the part most people miss. Negative thinking also distorts memory. Your mind begins to replay losses more vividly than wins, mistakes louder than progress, regret clearer than growth. So even when your life improves, your self-image doesn't. You start living in a past version of yourself that no longer exists. That's how people stay small in better circumstances. And there's another cost, a deeper one. Negative thinking slowly disconnects you from presence. You're either replaying what went wrong or rehearsing what might go wrong next. Rarely here, rarely now. Life keeps moving, but you're mentally somewhere else. This creates a quiet grief, not because something terrible happened, but because so much life passed without being fully lived. And the most dangerous part? Negative thinking feels familiar. It feels like you. So you defend it. You justify it. You say, that's just how I am. But that's not personality. That's conditioning. And conditioning can be undone. You don't kill negative thinking because it's evil. You kill it because it is expensive. It costs clarity, energy, confidence, time. And unlike failure, this cost compounds daily. In the next section, we'll break down where negative thinking actually comes from and why it's not your fault it developed. Because once you understand the source, you stop blaming yourself and start dismantling the pattern. Negative thinking doesn't come from weakness. It comes from learning. No one is born doubting themselves. No child enters the world believing they are not enough. That belief is installed. It forms slowly through repetition, environment, and emotional experiences you didn't have the tools to process at the time. Most negative thinking begins as protection. At some point in your life, being cautious kept you safe. Lowering expectations prevented disappointment. Overthinking helped you avoid embarrassment, rejection, or pain. Your mind learned a simple rule. If I expect less, it won't hurt as much. And for a while, that strategy worked. But the brain doesn't update its software automatically. It keeps running old survival programs long after the danger is gone. So now, instead of protecting you, those same patterns are limiting you. Here's an important truth most people never hear. Negative thinking is often a memory of past pain, not a prediction of future reality. Your mind is not forecasting, it's remembering. Every criticism you absorbed, every failure that wasn't processed properly, every moment you felt unseen, underestimated, or dismissed. Those moments leave impressions, and if no one helped you interpret them correctly, your mind filled in the gaps on its own, usually by blaming you. That's how thoughts like, "I'm not good enough," "I always mess things up," "nothing ever works out for me" are formed. Not because they're true, but because they were repeated internally when you didn't know how to challenge them. Another major source is environment. If you grew up around stress, comparison, instability, or emotional unpredictability, your nervous system learned vigilance, always scanning, always bracing. That state creates negative thinking automatically because the brain prioritizes threat over opportunity. It's not pessimism, it's conditioning. Social systems reinforce it too. School rewards conformity, not confidence. Social media trains comparison, not self-trust. Culture glamorizes confidence, but punishes vulnerability. So people learn to doubt quietly while performing confidence publicly. That internal split creates constant mental friction. And here's the critical part. Your mind doesn't care if a thought is true. It cares if a thought is familiar. Familiar thoughts feel safe, even when they hurt. That's why people cling to negative narratives, because uncertainty feels more dangerous than self-criticism. At least self-criticism is predictable, but understanding this changes everything. Because once you realize negative thinking was learned, not chosen, you stop identifying with it. You stop saying, "This is who I am," and start saying, "This is what I was taught." And what is taught can be untaught. You are not broken. You adapted. And now, it's time to upgrade the adaptation. In the next section, we'll talk about the biggest mistake people make when trying to eliminate negative thinking and why fighting your mind directly often makes it stronger. Because you don't win this battle through force. You win it through precision. Most people approach negative thinking like an enemy. They try to silence it, suppress it, argue with it, force themselves to think positive. And when that doesn't work, they assume something is wrong with them. But here's the truth. Most motivational content gets wrong. You cannot defeat negative thinking by attacking it head-on. Because the moment you fight a thought, you give it attention. And attention is fuel. The brain doesn't understand, "Don't think about this." It only understands focus. If I tell you right now, "Don't picture a red door," your mind instantly pictures a red door. That's how the mind works. So when you say, "I must stop thinking like this," you've already anchored the thought deeper into awareness. This is why people who try the hardest to be positive often feel the most mentally exhausted. They're in a constant internal war, and the mind was never designed for war against itself. Negative thoughts aren't intruders. They're signals. They're messengers pointing to unresolved fear, unprocessed emotion, or outdated belief systems. When you try to destroy the messenger, the message gets louder. That's why affirmations feel fake when you don't believe them. That's why "just be grateful" doesn't work when your nervous system is overwhelmed. That's why forcing optimism during pain creates inner resistance. You can't override a system that doesn't feel safe. Another reason fighting fails is identity attachment. The more you say, "I am trying to get rid of negative thoughts," the more your brain associates you with someone who has negative thoughts. It becomes part of your self-image. You don't become the person without negative thinking. You become the person constantly managing it. That's not freedom. That's maintenance. Here's the reframe that changes everything. Negative thoughts lose power when they are observed, not resisted. Observation creates distance. Resistance creates entanglement. When you step back and notice a thought, this is doubt, this is fear, This is old programming. You shift from being inside the thought to being aware of the thought. That single shift breaks its authority, because thoughts only control you when you mistake them for truth. Think of it like this. If a stranger on the street shouted an insult at you, you might feel something, but you wouldn't reorganize your entire identity around it. Yet when your own mind says something cruel, you believe it instantly. Not because it's accurate, but because it sounds familiar. Fighting negative thinking keeps you in reaction mode. Observing it puts you in control. This is not about ignoring problems or pretending everything is fine. It's about refusing to let automatic thoughts dictate your behavior, decisions, or sense of worth. In the next section, we'll talk about the most dangerous form of negative thinking, the kind that disguises itself as realism, logic, and just being honest. Because not all negative thoughts sound emotional. Some sound intelligent, and those are the hardest ones to kill. The most destructive negative thoughts are not loud. They don't scream. They don't panic. They don't sound emotional. They sound reasonable. They say things like, asterisk, I'm just being realistic. Asterisk, I know my limits. Asterisk, this probably won't work anyway. Asterisk, I've tried before. Asterisk, people like me don't succeed. These thoughts feel safe because they wear the mask of logic, and that's exactly why they're dangerous. Emotional negativity is easy to question, but logical negativity feels intelligent, responsible, mature, so it goes unchallenged. The mind uses past experiences as evidence to predict the future. But here's the flaw. The mind confuses familiarity with truth. Just because something happened before does not mean it will always happen again. Yet the brain loves patterns. It would rather keep you predictable than free. So it builds stories like, asterisk, every time I try, I fail. Asterisk, whenever I open up, I get hurt. Asterisk, if I take a risk, I'll lose what I have. And because these statements are based on real memories, they feel irrefutable, but they're incomplete. What your mind conveniently ignores is this. You are not the same person who lived those experiences. Your awareness has changed. Your skills have grown. Your understanding has deepened. Yet your thoughts are still referencing an old version of you. That's like using outdated maps to navigate a new city. Another danger of logical negativity is how it disguises fear as wisdom. Fear says, don't do this. Logic says, let's wait until conditions are perfect. Fear says, stay small. Logic says, be patient. Timing matters. But perfection is just fear that has learned how to speak politely. And waiting often becomes hiding. Logical negativity doesn't stop you with drama. It stops you with delay. Years pass not because you couldn't act, but because your thoughts always sounded reasonable enough to postpone courage. This is how people remain stuck while believing they're being careful. Another subtle trap is false humility. Thoughts like, asterisk, I'm not special. Asterisk, others deserve it more. Asterisk, I should be realistic about my place. These feel grounded, but they quietly dismantle ambition. True humility does not deny potential. It simply doesn't inflate ego. There is a difference between knowing your flaws and using them as permanent identity. Logical negative thinking convinces you that staying the same is smart. But growth has never been logical. Every major breakthrough required someone to move before certainty arrived. If you waited until the mind was fully convinced, nothing new would ever be built. Here's the shift that dissolves logical negativity. Instead of asking, is this thought true? Ask, is this thought useful? A thought can be factually based and still destructive. Yes, I failed before. True. But does that mean I should never try again? Not useful. Yes, people have disappointed me. True. But does that mean everyone will? Not useful. Your mind is not a judge. It's a survival machine. Its job is not to maximize your life. It's to minimize uncertainty. And uncertainty is where growth lives. In the next section, you'll learn how negative thinking becomes a habit and how to interrupt it before it takes control of your mood, actions, and future. Because once you break the pattern, the thoughts lose their grip permanently. Negative thinking does not begin as belief. It begins as repetition. A single thought means nothing, but a repeated thought becomes familiar, and familiarity slowly turns into identity. You don't wake up one day believing you're weak, unlucky, or incapable. You practice those thoughts quietly, daily, until they feel natural. This is how the loop forms. A situation triggers discomfort. The mind offers a negative interpretation. The body reacts emotionally. The emotion reinforces the thought, and the thought becomes the default response next time. Over time, the mind stops asking questions. It jumps straight to conclusions. This is why some people expect disappointment before anything even happens. Their nervous system has memorized it. The brain loves efficiency. If it finds a pattern that reduces emotional shock, it will reuse it even if it limits your life. Negative thinking becomes a habit not because it's true, but because it feels familiar, and familiarity feels safe. That's why optimism can feel uncomfortable at first. Not because it's wrong, but because it's unfamiliar. Your brain resists change, even positive change. This is why telling yourself, "Think positive," never works. You cannot argue with a habit. You must interrupt it. The first step is awareness without judgment. The moment you notice a negative thought, don't fight it. Label it. Say silently, "This is a pattern," not "This is who I am." That small distinction creates distance. When you identify a thought as a pattern, you step out of it. The second step is delay. Negative thoughts want immediate reaction. They want you to withdraw, overthink, self-sabotage, shut down. So pause. Give yourself 10 seconds before reacting. In that pause, ask, what action would I take if this thought wasn't in control? You don't need a positive thought yet. You just need a neutral one. Neutrality breaks the loop. Instead of, "I'm going to fail," shift to, "I don't know the outcome yet." Instead of, "This always goes wrong," shift to, "This is new." These statements don't excite the mind, and that's the point. Excitement can trigger resistance. Neutrality slides past it. The third step is behavior first, mindset second. Most people wait to feel confident before acting, but confidence is not a prerequisite. It's a result. Action rewires belief faster than thinking ever will. When you move despite the negative thought, the brain updates its data. It says, "Oh, we survived." That weakens the pattern. You don't need to silence negative thoughts. You need to stop obeying them. Every time you act without their permission, their authority fades. And finally, consistency over intensity. Breaking a mental habit is not about one powerful moment. It's about small interruptions repeated daily. Each time you notice the thought, each time you pause, each time you choose action. Anyway, this is how the mind learns a new default, not by force, but by experience. In the next section, you'll discover how your environment silently feeds negative thinking, and how changing what surrounds you can change what lives inside your head without effort. Negative thinking is not created in isolation. It is reinforced by what surrounds you. Your mind is not only shaped by your thoughts, it is shaped by what it repeatedly consumes. The conversations you hear, the content you watch, the tone of the people around you, the pace of your daily life. All of it quietly programs your inner dialogue. This is why you can make progress internally, then suddenly feel pulled back without knowing why. Because your environment is whispering a different story. If you are surrounded by constant complaint, your mind learns to scan for problems. If you are surrounded by cynicism, hope begins to feel naive. If you are surrounded by urgency and noise, your nervous system never settles long enough to think clearly. Negative thinking often isn't a personal flaw. It's environmental conditioning. Your brain mirrors what it sees most. This is why some people feel calm in silence, while others feel anxious the moment the noise stops. They've trained their mind to survive stimulation, not stillness. Look closely at your daily inputs. What do you hear first in the morning? What do you scroll before bed? Who do you speak to when something goes wrong? Most people underestimate how much emotional tone is contagious. Stress spreads. Fear spreads. Hopelessness spreads. And the mind absorbs it without asking permission. You may think your thoughts are your own, but many of them are echoes. Echoes of opinions you didn't choose. Beliefs you inherited. Narratives repeated so often they felt true. This is why trying to fix your thinking without adjusting your environment feels exhausting. You are swimming against the current. The goal is not to isolate yourself from the world. The goal is to become intentional. Start with reduction, not replacement. You don't need to add positivity everywhere. You need to remove unnecessary negativity. Less noise, less exposure, less emotional clutter. Silence is not empty, it is corrective. When the mind is no longer overwhelmed, it naturally becomes clearer. Next, curate your inputs. Choose content that slows you down instead of speeding you up. Choose voices that speak with depth instead of outrage. Choose spaces that feel grounded, not reactive. Your nervous system needs safety to heal. Negative thinking thrives in tension. It weakens in calm. Also, pay attention to the people closest to you. Not everyone needs to be removed, but boundaries may need to be redrawn. If every conversation reinforces limitation, your growth will feel lonely. You don't need constant encouragement, you need emotional neutrality. People who don't drain you. People who don't mock your seriousness. People who don't pull you back into old versions of yourself. Even physical environment matters. Clutter creates mental friction. Disorder signals chaos to the brain. Clean spaces create mental breathing room. This is not aesthetic advice. It's neurological. When your environment becomes calmer, your thoughts lose fuel. Negative thinking needs stimulation. Remove the stimulation, and it weakens. You don't fight the mind by force. You starve the patterns that no longer serve you. And once your environment stops reinforcing the old loop, you'll notice something subtle but powerful. Your mind becomes quieter without effort. In the next section, you'll learn how silence, stillness, and deliberate solitude can become your greatest tools not to escape life, but to reprogram how you experience it. Most people are afraid of silence, not because silence is empty, but because it removes distraction. And when distraction disappears, the mind is forced to reveal what it has been avoiding. Negative thinking survives by staying busy. Busy scrolling, busy talking, busy reacting, busy consuming noise. Silence exposes patterns. That's why the mind resists it. But silence is not punishment. It is medicine. When the external world quiets down, the nervous system finally gets a chance to reset. Your body stops scanning for threats. Your breathing deepens. Your thoughts slow. And in that slowing, clarity begins to return. Most people try to think their way out of negative thinking, That rarely works, because the mind cannot solve problems while overstimulated. Silence gives the mind space to reorganize itself. This is why breakthroughs often happen in moments of stillness, late at night, early in the morning, alone on a walk, sitting quietly with no agenda. Not because you tried harder, but because you finally stopped interfering. Stillness allows the subconscious to surface. And when it does, something important happens. You begin to observe thoughts instead of drowning in them. A thought appears, and instead of reacting, you notice it. That small distance changes everything. Because the moment you can observe a thought, it no longer controls you. Silence trains this ability. At first, it feels uncomfortable. The mind becomes louder before it becomes quieter. Old worries surface. Unfinished emotions knock. This is not regression, this is release. What has been suppressed is asking to be processed. If you stay present, without judgment, the intensity passes. And on the other side of that discomfort is calm. Not forced calm, natural calm. Silence teaches you that thoughts rise and fall on their own. You don't have to chase them. You don't have to fight them. They pass if you let them. This realization weakens negative thinking at its root, because most suffering comes from believing every thought deserves attention. It doesn't. Stillness also restores intuition. When noise fades, your inner sense sharpens. You start feeling what is right before you can explain it. Your decisions become clearer, your reactions slower, your confidence quieter but stronger. Silence reconnects you with yourself, not the version shaped by pressure, comparison, and expectation, but the grounded version underneath. This is why people who practice stillness move differently. They don't rush to prove. They don't panic at uncertainty. They don't overreact to setbacks. Their mind has learned stability. You don't need hours of meditation. You need moments of intentional quiet. 5 minutes without stimulation, 10 minutes of sitting without input, a walk without headphones, a morning without scrolling. Small pockets of silence retrain the mind. Over time, negative thoughts lose urgency. They still appear, but they no longer feel like emergencies. And when thoughts stop feeling urgent, they stop controlling behavior. Silence doesn't make you weak or passive. It makes you precise. In the next section, you'll learn how to replace negative thinking, not with fake positivity, but with grounded, resilient mental frameworks that hold steady under pressure.